So if you think about it in that way, you want your engagement letter to be very much clear, right? Clarity, that's kind of why, and I'll share my screen. So you can see this kind of came out, I don't know if anybody watches the Legal Accounting Wednesdays, but this title came out of that. I just kind of spit it out of my mouth, that we want clarity with our clients. And basically that is what we're looking for when it comes to working with clients and making sure it's legally written down the way it needs to be. So that's what your engagement letter. How many here, and you could put it in the chat, or if you want to just feel free to speak and talk. And Nicole, you've got the room, right? You're letting people, oh, I didn't let, you know what, let me make,
I am.
and I gotta make Rosanna co-host because I didn't do that, so she can help too. How many here use engagement letters or a contract, or who does proposals?
I do.
Use it, yeah. So when do you have a contract or an engagement letter?
I have a letter of agreement, and
What, a letter of agreement?
I ran it by 3 different
I
attorney
kinda-
clients and had them take.
I guess it's a contract, but I wrote it, so I feel like I don't know how super legal it is, but I put all my information in there. What's required of me, what's required of them, price increases, so on and so forth.
Who here does does an annual contract, like goes in, and who does an evergreen one? Let's start with the evergreen one. Who does an evergreen one and actually just does one and it just rolls over every year? Tanya, I'm going to put myself in the spot of that as well. Anybody else? Yeah.
And I guess mine is because it doesn't have an end date. It just has a notice period that you have to give.
So yeah, you do too. I see that Rosanna says she uses an agreement. They call it, Tanya says she calls it a professional service plan. Kim does evergreen. So yeah, so that's okay. So yeah, we're going to get into this as well, because this is part of the eye-opening stuff, because it's a pain in the neck, right? I do like, and I stole it from Rosanna, that she puts in that clause, which we did. Your rate goes up every year, 6%. We do 6%. It's just automatically rolls into that. So the terms stay the same and it rolls into a 6% increase, but it's an evergreen. We don't prepare a new one every year. We don't like set the terms every year. We don't reset it every year. And from what I studied this week about this topic, that I'm doing it wrong, that although it's extra work, really should redefine your terms every year and your engagement every year and have it signed every year. So let's move on here to the next slide. So what is an engagement letter? An engagement letter is a written agreement, and it describes the business relationship, and it's entered into by the client and a company, basically, in our case, right? And the letter will detail out the scope and the terms and the costs. And the purpose of the agreement is to set the expectations of both sides. So you're trying to lay down the ground rules, basically putting what you probably discussed with the client into writing. So that's what it's for, right? So top reasons to have one. Does anybody here do it without have a client or 2 or 5 or all of them without an engagement or a contract or anything? Is anybody? Julie? 1, yeah. I can't see everybody's faces. So, you know, Nicole, if you see a lot of people saying that, you have a couple. Yeah.
I think iPhone, is it Deanna maybe?
I think it's Deanna, yeah.
Says they have a couple. Yeah. Jana has a couple.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, that's, sometimes that happens with just a small, like something comes up and you do it and then you don't bother because it's like, oh, I'll do that for you. Right. And it's funny because one of the statistics, and I'll get into that a little bit as we go deeper. One of the statistics is 50% of all the litigation where people will sue is because you had no contract at all. So you may have verbally, but it's hard to back up verbal, obviously with emails and things like that. And it's just, we just get busy. I mean, basically, I think that it comes from being busy, and you might have worked with the person in the past. And I know I have them. I'm going to be straight up honest. I have clients that come to me annually and they just like, Linda, can you fix this? And I don't lay down the ground rules. I'll throw together, here's your quote, and I never follow through with that part of it. And
Yeah, Joanne just said that she, as most of us know, that she had an experience with an attorney that was terrible and her contract saved her.
so her contract saved her derriere, and I think that's wonderful that
Mhm.
you made sure that you use that contract. So
Mhm.
top reasons to have an engagement letter. They define your business relationship, right? That's going to put the rules down, and it's going to say that it's professional too, right? So it's going to outline the fee structure and exactly the services that you're going to provide. And they help you to set expectations, right? So that's a big part of the expectations, but on both sides. So it's going to sit down and tell the person exactly what you're going to do for them. And then it's going to mitigate scope creep, right? If you all saw my little post with that thing got a lot of attention because of the creepy picture, not at Halloween, right? But it'll stop you from getting scope creep. And when you set those expectations with your client and clearly lay it out, especially like you put exactly what your services are. And that sometimes takes some time. And you have to be careful when you start to lay it out, because sometimes we go, I've been guilty of this. I'll write AR, AP, and the client will come back and go, what is the AR thing that you're doing for me? They don't know what AR is. So we talk in accounting speak, and it happens like that sometimes. Yes, so I love that question, Julie. Do you list the things that you don't include? So we do. We list what we don't include, or we list what the client is supposed to do. So the client, have you ever had a client do this? I'll do the bank downloads for you. And first of all, don't let them do it, because then all you do is have to go back and fix them. I started out doing that. I was trying to keep the prices down, and I'm letting the client download from the bank. It was just the dumbest thing, dumbest idea I had ever had. But you want to, right, you want to spell it out, what exactly that you're doing, because it will stop the scope creep. So if you start to see a client, what we have one the other day, like, they open like 5 more bank accounts. It's like, well, you want to put, there's 2 IOLTAs, there's 2 operating, there's 1 payroll. And then if they decide they want to do profit first, then you're going to have to go, hey, you just complicated this and it's outside the scope. You can go right back to your contract and pull it in. And I think about it because years ago, when I used to be heavily involved in the real estate side with my husband, we actually had to have something, because we had some people move in and they thought it was okay in this, 18 unit building to like do their laundry. They didn't want to go to the dryer. So they just hung everything over the railing. And so we had to add a paragraph about you can't hang clothes and socks and bras over the railing because it's not fair to the other tenants. Sadly, I had to add that to the lease. So the lease has got like, I don't know, the provisions are insane, but it's the same thing. So and engagement letters are going to, they're going to mitigate risk. So you're going to keep, let's see, oh, it reduces risk. So it's going to reduce your risk of having scope creep, having a relationship with your client that it's not clear. It just makes prudent sense to have engagement letters. And if you want, I don't know, anybody here, we're not going to get into practice management. Does anybody here like use PI, Practice Ignition, or we use 17 Hats, we use Liscio, where we can create templates. So if we do a data migration in 17 Hats, I have a way to add a field for like the tool that they're currently using. And then we do a migration. It's almost the same thing all the time. So we template it so I don't have to reinvent the wheel with all the line items in it. Does anybody else have similar practice where they have like a template, or do you guys write it every single time? Just
I
curious.
use Dubsado now. I was using 17 Hats,
Mhm.
which I liked, but Dubsado is definitely for me a lot easier.
Yeah. I know
Yeah.
17 Hats is a learning curve to that.
Oof, there is.
I actually had a fight with them this week. They didn't even answer me. Working on getting the things in templates into Liscio still. Yeah, I don't know if the process is still, you have to send them to them and then you have to like have them upload it. That's a little clunky on their side. I know they're working towards us being able to do it. Has anybody used HoneyBook? I've heard about HoneyBook. Who do I know that uses HoneyBook? I'm trying to think, might be Dan Luthi. But yeah, HoneyBook's an interesting product. It has that ability. Practice Ignition is like the one that's kind of well known in the industry, but it's really expensive. So you have to have a lot of clients. I know Michael Lee, my friend Michael Lee, he uses that because he's a huge company because the price point. Even Jacob Schroeder uses it as well, my other friend. So, and using engagement letters is definitely going to help you with all of these reasons, right? They're going to define your business relationship, set your client expectations so you're clear on what the job is, and it will stop some of that scope creep. And the most important part is mitigating the risk.
And just to touch on, Steve earlier said that he also includes like what would happen if, if a client adds things that are not in the scope of work in the contract, which I think we have one recently that we were looking over, that there is some additional information on like what would happen or what we would do if there's additional work, and what those charges may look like, because they're not in the monthly fee or whatever it may be in the contract.
Yeah, we had that with one of our clients that ended up being that we were engaged with them. Actually, it's the one that we're having the issue with now, engaged with them. And they said that they're IOLTA aligned. And we got in and moved them to QuickBooks, moved them to Lean Law, and then said, hey, your numbers don't align. Can you provide us with some documentation that shows that these numbers align? And they couldn't. They said, well, the last girl told us it matched. Like, I'm sure she did. I need to see it in paper. I need to see the bank statement. I need to see how she did that. I want to see her three-way reconciliation. They couldn't come up with it. And we ended up, our scope became, we are going to figure it out. We started going backwards. So 2020 we went to 2019 and rebuilt 2019, still didn't align, still a problem. The problem number changed, but it's still, we had to go back to 2017, 2016, all the way back to the beginning of their time in that bank to 2015. And we back-billed it backwards, which I do not recommend, but they didn't want to spend a lot of money. So to find it, we just kind of put a price on, which I would never do again, that this is what it's going to cost to do per year. And we ended up having to go through the whole thing, and detangling it was difficult because it was just, the other person was a little on the sloppy side with things. And we ended up figuring it out, and had a lot to do with majorly with fees and wire fees that they had been pulling out of the IOLTA and didn't, fix. But the part of that is the fact that it wasn't in our contract to go back and back build and rebuild historically their entire IOLTA, which is what we ended up doing. And it was
So were you able to recover money, or did you just have to eat it?
No, we did get paid for it, but I don't think enough. But they were an ongoing client up until, they still are until September 15th. They are still an ongoing client. So in a way, we still do. We have probably recouped it. I don't know with that client, probably not. I am going to be like, I'm throwing a party. I hope it's on a Friday. We'll all have a party when that one's over. But it's been a rough week this week. But overall, and this is just kind of an idea of what you need to have in the basic components. And I'm going to go into detail on most of this. Keep it simple. The KISS method. Have everybody heard of the KISS method? Keep it simple, stupid. Define the parties, your scope, your terms, your fee structure. These are the parts that need to be in here in a typical engagement letter. So defining the parties, and this is key. So one of the things that I found interesting is, and I have had this happen with a client, that the person called me, they were the person in charge, and this was with a construction company years ago. This person, I'm the person in charge. He lets me handle everything. He's out in the field. So this is a contractor. I said, oh, great. And I started to put the contract together. She signed the contract. And when it came time to pay, she had nothing to do with the company. She was only the bookkeeper, if you want to put it around those terms. She was nobody signatory. She was not anything. Of course, but the way I work is I always make people pay me ahead. So I did get compensated, but the guy ended up getting, the owner of the business started to get involved in the whole conversation at the end. And he decided he didn't want to hire me. And I had to refund. I refunded a portion of it just to get rid of the whole situation. But in this case, I made the mistake of not dealing with the person that owned or managing partner, the person that's really in charge. So how do you figure out who's really in charge at a company? Does anybody know a good way to find? You can go on the state website and look to see, like in Florida, Sunbiz, and pull up a company's records where they're filing their annual fee and their records every year, and see who's on that paperwork. So you can do that. You can ask the client, who's the managing partner, who's responsible for any of these things that are happening. It's an important conversation you can have when you're articles of incorporation. Thank you. That was the word I was trying to think of. It's not anything but a bad idea. Even if somebody says they are hearsay, you might want to still go and double check that, because yeah, asking in the questionnaire is a great idea, Angela, asking that question, because you want to speak to the person that is financially the person that's in charge. And if you do sign them up with a new QuickBooks file and you put them in a new merchant account, you don't want your name on that. You want that responsible person. And you don't want the admin on there or the bookkeeper on there. If they're just an employee, they're not really responsible. You want to make sure that you have that conversation saying, look, I know that you want Mary or Joe to take care of any problems with merchant, but really ultimately you are the one in charge. And I think that's even like a question on the QuickBooks test that they say, who do you think should be signing this paper? And it should definitely not be you on any client. And so you want to properly identify who's going to receive the services. It could be an individual, it could be a group, it could be an entity, but you want that name put into your contract. So, John Matthews, might be the person that's on there, or it could be that you're working directly with the Proper Trust LLC. That's a good idea too, Steve, checking with the Bar Association. That's a really good tip, because you want to make sure that you have the right person that's in charge. That's a great idea. And you want to use the appropriate address. So if you're working with a mid-market firm that has a bunch of subsidiaries, you want to make sure that you specify the client name, the business name, and include the client's address, the address. Don't go, there was a case that I listened to on a podcast that they ended up having, they were sued, and because they had the wrong address was a sticky point in the lawsuit. So make sure that if they're in, I don't know, Houston, Texas, but they've got Austin and this and that. If Houston's and you can get this as well by looking up that articles of incorporation, you want that address. You want the address that's on file with the state, basically. Don't use the word you in the contract language. Your responsibility, you. If you don't define who you is, you want to actually put in responsible person, John Matthews, John Matthews Law Firm at PLLC. You want to really get that finite in the details. So any way you can really make this super clear is your best bet when it comes to anything to do with engagement letters. So the scope, right? So now we're getting into the meat of why you're making this contract, right? Scope of services is probably the most important piece on the engagement letter. And you want to include in your scope of services, you want to be very detailed, like we mentioned before, because it's going to stop and mitigate scope creep, right? We don't want the scope creep happening. And it's going to guard against developing any unreasonable expectations where maybe the client thinks you're supposed to have a meeting every week with her because that's, I'm expecting it. What do you mean you're not going to give me a meeting every week? Well, if it's not in the contract, guess what? I don't have to give you a meeting every week. So that's important to clearly define what services you're providing, right? So you want to be really detailed here. You want to say, I'm going to be doing, a ledger conversion. I'm going to be historically rebuilding your data from January 2020 through December 2020, and then January through July, because that's where we're at, 2021. You want to get that detailed in this scope part of writing your engagement letter. You want to say, I'm going to be converting your data from the old data, which was time slips desktop, to lien law. And then maybe they're going to be importing the WIP, but you want to say that the WIP import and the client name import into lien law will be done by lien law at an additional price that you will pay through lien law. You want to make sure that they're clear that lien law charges that fee, we had a little bit of that happening where lien law didn't tell us they charged the client a fee. We didn't know. We just thought, well, they're signing up, it's included, and it wasn't included, and they charge a hefty fee. Like there are thousands of dollars. So if you know that, then you know that as you are doing the engagement, you want to clearly define that. You want to clearly define who's paying for what software. So if your client if you're doing a rebuild and you're buying QuickBooks Online, you're getting them set up with lien law, paid by John Matthews, company, or if you've defined you, paid by your firm, right? Your firm, or paid by you. You want that to be clearly defined, that paid by you. Proper Trust isn't paying for this. You are paying for it. And that's part of making sure that that's in there, that they don't just assume that you're going to pay their software. I mean, that can happen too. Maybe you're going to do another one that's big is, are you going to do the accounts receivable and the accounts payable? Maybe the accounts receivable, and we're going to be doing this using Dext and put all that detail in that part of the scope, because if you don't, they're going to think that you're going to do it manually. You just want to get as much in overkill maybe, but you want to really be super, super refined in the language. Accounts receivable is an expensive add-on because it requires a lot more work. And I don't know how many of you actually do accounts receivable for clients, whether it be in an app or anybody do the accounts receivable side for attorneys. I know we do. Anybody? Yes. It's extra. It costs a lot. When a client will look at it, they'll be like, are you kidding me? It's that expensive? Yes, it is. So oh, Samantha, you're doing it by hand. I think I forgot who I was talking to, but I've said, even if the client's like, I'm not paying that, if you can put them into something, put it in the quote. Like if you can throw lien law in for $45 and just say, hey, this is a tool we're going to use, and you absorb that and build it into the quote. If it's less work for you, it's worth it. If they're just so dead set against like paying for an app, that happens sometimes with attorneys. They can be penny wise and pound foolish. And sometimes it's just going to save time. I've had it where in fact, I got a client right now that I'm doing a rebuild for, and he did it manually, and he was insistent in doing it manually. And I actually created a video and said, here's the steps on how you're going to go forward doing this manually on your own. Click, and I made it like so torturous. Like you have to make the client, you have to make the customer name, the matter name, then you got to go create that in the liability. And I made all those steps, and then you got to add these extra journal entries. Oh, and here's how you do it in lien law. Click. And the guy's like, oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that much. And then I mentioned about how when you're doing all these manual steps, you're opening the door for mistakes. So sometimes that little video demonstration can speak volumes over you telling them, right? They sometimes put that wall up, and you just have to kind of knock the wall down and just let it go. Oh, Steve, so you're supporting a client with AR and not sure if it'd be ongoing. That's interesting. Sometimes they just don't want to do it. And a lot of times, if they want to do it themselves, they want to do it themselves because they feel more hands-on. They're maybe working with client. Well, I've got an immigration firm right now that I'm going to offer what we've offered to do sometimes that part, because it's subscription based, but they're really in the field meeting with the people. They know what they're selling. It'd be hard. It'd be almost as much work as actually like with subscription. It's just a flat fee. So, fixed fee. So they could just go and do it that way. Maybe you're doing training. So we always keep a separate paragraph for training, that we're training the client an X amount of hours. Put the hours in. You don't want to leave that as an open door. The workflow is a mess, Steve. But yeah, so put the training hours in. You really want to make sure that we're going to provide 2 hours, 2 sessions, and each session's an hour long. Put that in there. I keep saying I'm going to go on to Canva. I had a meeting with a client, or was in something that I was in, and there was a little clock ticking backwards. And I asked them, where'd you get that? I would love to have that from my meetings, because I want them to know, because we have some clients that they go over every single time. It's like they're getting a little extra. And if I had that little clock in the corner counting backwards, that would be great to see that our time's running up. running out, I just want you to know that it's doing that. So yeah, and then sometimes you can offer to a client, and you might want to put this in maybe as an add-on. I think it was Hector that did this as an add-on, that he put it in that if you wanted the recording of the video afterwards, there was an extra fee of like $100. And I was like, wow, I give that away for free, but that's an extra piece of another way that you can generate some income if you want to add on that. We're going to do the meeting, but if you want it recorded, he was getting money for doing that. I thought it was pretty smart. But be careful with templated forms. You start to use the templates, that's where you can kind of be in a rush, and the person's or the lady wants the quote right away, and you're like, bing, bang, boom, and you kind of throw it out there. If you don't take the time, we use my husband for that at our firm. He's Mr. Redline. He's very old school. My husband's a lot older than me. So I actually have to put it on a PDF and email it to him, and he prints it. See my printer? He's the only one that uses paper in this office. And then he reads it with a red pen. And that's why Sarah nicknamed him Mr. Redline, but he reads it diligently. And then he'll give me, because he doesn't understand what I do, which is great to have somebody who doesn't understand what you do, a husband, a spouse, a significant other. Because then if I'm writing something that doesn't make sense, he's like, I don't understand what you're doing here. And then we go back.
Tanya says, is your husband for hire?
Yes. Give him work, make him do something to earn his keep
He
here.
is great because he takes the emotion out of whatever we're saying, right? So we're writing something with emotion in it, or whatever it may be in the situation, being the one in it, and he's not at all. So he's writing it very like contractual, and
A very good example of that was we had this meeting yesterday. So you get to hear part of the story. So we had a meeting yesterday with a client that's been rude and disrespectful in the last 3 meetings, at least. The first meeting, I got to the point after the first meeting, I wish I had snapshotted Zoom, because all our faces were like, we were all really upset, because she was just like pushing the buttons and dictating, you do like that. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not your underling. And second of all, I'm way too old for anybody to be disrespectful to me. I don't allow it. So I sat there and let Sarah's like great at that kind of stuff. She's amazing handling, like she was probably standing up, but looked like, she's like, she interrupted and got a little bit of control over the situation. But so we were like, okay, let's see how it goes next week. And it happened again and it happened again. And then this week I'm like, I know Sarah's away. We're done.
And given this is a client that you've had for 2 years, I mean, it's not a new client, it's just a change of roles in the partnership. And so this partner became part of the role that worked with us. And so it just turned into we were kind of blindsided by the relationship at that point.
Because we've worked with this firm. They're great. The person we worked with before is a dream. She was a sweetheart, really accommodating. It was a wonderful, mutually respectful relationship until this. So we decided we're going to disengage. And the 3 of us collectively, then Sarah had the internet blowing the right way, and she hopped in on, we had a phone call. And I'm typing away and I'm putting in, we're pissed. So we created a nasty gram. What we were going to say to her, we're going to call her out. You're disrespectful, you're rude. If you could read this, you would have been like, wow, you're going to send it to a client, which is exactly what my husband said. He goes, do you feel better? No, there's more. I held it back. And he's like, you're not going down any of those roads. So he came in and we rewrote it. I had to type it, email it, he printed it, and he looked at it, he goes, take this out, take that out. And then it was just, as of that, we're no longer going to be working with you. As of today, I think I put, then she of course went back and looked at the contract. And this contract was done by Sarah and I. And we just we were working with the nice lady. We just kind of flung it together. It was really not detailed. It was really vague. But clearly at the bottom, it says each party is required to give 45 days notice. Oh, so we're on the hook to September 15th, but it does not say we have to have a meeting with this vampire. We do not have to, Brunhilde, sorry, we are not meeting with you every week. It is not happening. I actually physically get a knot in my stomach, and that whole day, that meeting is at 12 at my time, and it ruins my entire day knowing that I have to meet with her. So this is the kind of person, like, why would you want to work with her? But she's already dictated in her response, not only that we are going to abide by this contract, or she said, how did she say? I expect you to abide by your contract.
Yeah, the
But also-
expectation of what we provide.
Also, what she's expecting from us, like, she's got her bossy little way that, we probably should share the details with you guys so you don't end up with her. You know? Can't do it because we're in the NDA, but we can maybe, but I'm only kidding. But really, this is the exact reason why you want to have a great contract, because if I had all this spelled out in my lease, it says month to month for every person. It's a month to month. I can take them, you know, not now because of COVID, but I could actually, if I have a bad tenant, maybe somebody who's selling drugs or something, I don't even bother to I just this is the end of the contract. We're done. You know, I mean, you try to work it out, but if it's something like that egregious, I have to get that person out of the building for the rest of the other tenants. It's the same kind of thing. But so you get to hear our story, our horror story. There's also, let's see, come on. Why isn't it? Oh, don't tell me this is frozen now. Come on. Let me hit this button. Nope. Here we go. Add deadlines
you
with a disclaimer. Please put the disclaimers in there and add deadlines. If you need documents to keep working, make sure you clearly define that it's the client responsibilities. We actually have a paragraph that says client responsibilities, and then put a date in there. These have to be put in a timely fashion. And one of the paragraphs I'm considering adding is that if it doesn't, now I've got a few clients from my firm from back in the day that aren't legal, and they're terrible about getting me the documents that I need. So it ends up being a race against time in January to redo a whole year because they weren't giving me the documents. And I feel like a nagging wife every week, like, I need this, I need that. I'm thinking about putting a paragraph in that if I don't receive these there's an extra fee. Because why should my staff be, I mean, they're busy too. Why should my staff have to rush and scramble because you couldn't take 5 minutes to get me what I needed, even if it's just a login? You know, there's some people that don't want to give you the login. I had to call yesterday, the client about a broken bank feed, and it stopped giving me the information. And the bank called me because she finally, after weeks of telling her, I need access to your credit card, I can't see anymore. The bank called me, and guess what? She closed that account back when it stopped. Like, you serious? You had to call your bank? She emailed the bank, and the bank had to tell me it was closed, and that's why it was zero. It was all set. But I mean, you know, and she's a decorator, interior decorator. You kind of, if anybody's had an interior decorator client, it's a lot different than working with attorneys. Have I heard of Keeper app? You know, I have. I think Seth mentions it. What do you do with that, Steve? If you want to unmute and tell us. It bugs the client.
Yes, it has modules in it where it's tied to the QuickBooks Online account,
Ooh.
client account, and it will pull up everything that let's say that you have things being dumped into uncategorized transactions or a suspense account or whatever. It will pull all of those transactions up. You can customize an email to the client. You can say bug them every Monday morning at 8 a.m. They can answer you in that email. It comes back into Keeper and it posts it in QuickBooks for you.
Mad love for you, Steve.
You must get this app. It is.
Oh my God. Joy, do you have it? She's nodding. Do you use it too?
Yep. Joy and I got
Tanya
it.
says she uses it too.
Oh
We
my
got
God,
it at
why haven't you told me this a long time?
We just got it when we were at the BKX convention, and tell them, talk to Ben over there and tell them that we sent you, that all of us from
Okay,
BKX.
do you have like an affiliate link or something, Steve, that you can share so you get like the credit?
Is Keeper.io. Oh no, there's no affiliate link. But
Okay, well, we'll
honest to
definitely.
God, this thing is a lifesaver.
Oh my gosh, Nicole, I can tell you're doing a Sarah, you're looking it up.
I'm writing it down. I was writing it
Okay,
down first,
awesome.
just so I didn't forget.
And
And
Nicole,
I wrote Ben.
you want to talk to Ben Stein.
Cool,
Yes.
thank you.
You're welcome. Let us know how it goes. Maybe we could have him as a guest.
That would be awesome.
He
That
will
would be
totally
awesome.
do it. He'll totally do it.
We have.
Oh yeah, Tanya's like, he'll hook it up.
Oh, awesome.
So, okay. Well,
We
that's
have,
good to hear.
this month, we have Gravity Payments coming, explaining how that works with lien law. And then we'll tell, definitely, that sounds like an amazing person to have. Oh my God, that seems like a dream. Yeah, I have a custom report too. So I do the same thing. I customize the report in QuickBooks and send it off. This sounds way more effective though, Joanne. It sounds like, because they can answer on it, where I don't know, sometimes my clients just forget about it. But I do exactly that. I've had it set up where I have, here's the questions, and then they get annoyed. And then at the end of the year, they like, these are like the little small client, low hanging fruit ones that I have like $250 a month that barely do anything in a month. And then they get annoyed that I have to bother them all the time. It's like, it's hard. I mean, it's hard. So what is going on with this thing? Why won't my clicker work? Okay, final pieces. So let's go into the final pieces here. You want a conflict waiver. So you want terms of service. We'll start with the terms of service. You want terms of service. If the data from your previous system is not ready for conversion. So if you have the responsibility on the client to give you the client list, and it pulls out like PC law with giant headers in Excel that, or not even in Excel, it's in PDF that you have to convert. You really want to make sure that you spell it out, that it's the client's responsibility to provide you with the client list, unless you're going to do that work, and then you want to put that in the scope of work. And then you want to have it in the report as well, inside the engagement, that you're going to have your team review or Lien Law's team review this data and making sure that it is in the format to import it. We did an import with QuickBooks Enterprise to online, and we had some issues with getting the data into Lien Law replicated. So be very careful when using Lien Law. We're going to do a Lien Law show where I'm going to show you all the things that I like, and then things that drive me bananas that and Nicole, you can co-host with me. There's things in Lien Law that, Jonathan, adore them. I love the product, totally love it, but I want you to know some of the things that I find as barriers that we need to work around, and I want you guys to know the workarounds that we do. But you really want to have that. If there's any extra service to be provided in engagement, it's going to be separate. So you want to have that line in the contract that says, if you have these things above, anything extra, if I have to rebuild your IOLTA back to the beginning of time, it's this, it's going to be extra, and you're going to have to do a change order. So know that you're going to have to do a change order as well. The conflict waiver is to say what would happen if you're sued, right? So you want to have that as well. Okay, I'm going to have to use my button. Define the client responsibilities. We already kind of touched on that, but you do want to make sure that if they're required to give you bank statements, their spreadsheet that they've been keeping their stuff on, anything to do with what that you need to do the work, access to the payroll service, anything like that, you want that in the contract. You also don't forget 1099s, you should be compensated for that. And that's a whole nother paragraph that you want to have in your contract that states that 1099 service is an extra fee at X per amount. You don't want to let that just be, clients think that's part of our work, and it's so big. And of course, 1099s, you kind of want to start to track now and get that in place. So then in January, you're not going, you got the deadline looming. But yeah, absolutely put that in there. You want to have the financial terms. How are you going to be compensated? Are you going to be prepaid at the first of the month or 15th or however you do it? Is that required that you're paid prior to the beginning of the month? And anybody who pushes back on that, offering credit cards makes a difference. We charge, what do we charge, Nicole? I think we charge, somebody wants to know, what do we charge? It's like, I charge like a base fee of $50, and it gets like $10 a form. So we charge quite a bit, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. How long's my contract? Not long enough, given this lady that I'm having to get rid of. It's actually in 17 hats, and it's pretty much on one page, because it's 17 hats. It's kind of like a legal page. But yeah, I need to read it. We need to get in here and kind of implement some of these things that I'm talking about, because it's written, and you want to put like terms of service, period of engagement, and you really should consider, and this is one of the things I heard in the podcast, every year. And I hope this kind of lights a fire that you guys are going to take some time to do this, to maybe June is better than December to redo your contracts. Like, hey, this is my annual thing, because June or July or even August, this is when Intuit raises its rates. So if you bundled in QuickBooks, we know QuickBooks Online, they raise it. Advanced, they raised quite a bit. you want to get paid for that, right? I have clients that I know I've bundled that in back in the day before I started making them pay for it. So you want to start to put those things into. You want to put the fee structure down. You want to make sure that the fee structure is in place, that this is, sometimes we'll do a deposit. Sometimes we don't want to say, hey, you owe us 25, 45,000. It's frightening to the client. So we very carefully word the terms that we want an upfront deposit of $12,000 to start this giant, that data migration project. And then the payments are every 15th of the month for the, till we finalize the project of 8,000, 8,000, 8,000, or a smaller client, you might be paid in a different way. I highly recommend if you're doing a data migration project or a rebuild or a fix, get paid for the entire project up front, unless it's like the one like we're doing, this gigantic. If you're looking at anything 5,000 or under to do like a complete rebuild, make sure you're paid up front. When they are most excited, they're signing up with you. They're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I found you. You are going to help me get out of this mess that I'm in. Do it then. Because down the road, after you start asking them for data and asking them for documents and all that, then they get cranky and then they're like, well, how much have you gotten done? And no, this way they're invested in it. They've paid you now. They're going to get you your documents. That's been my experience. You can do what you want, but I highly recommend. I've tried all different ways. I felt bad making somebody like, oh, I feel bad asking for $900. Nope, not anymore. Not anymore. And they typically will pay. I have not been pushed back on that. So if you find that, and if you get pushed back, that's your first red flag, you probably don't want to work with them. So, on acceptance of, you want to put in your timelines. You want to say, this is when we're going to start we start the project as soon as deposit is received. And then from there, I usually put in the contract, we will set forth a formal timeline of the expected date of completion. If it's a contract on a project. But in that case, I will tell them right in the letter, this is, I expect you to give me the documents I need at X date, or this timeline won't work. So I actually do that in a separate email, but still writing. But I will put in the thing that that I am, you can put it in the contract itself, but spell out the actual dates in maybe an outside email, unless because usually they, this is pre-signing. So it's kind of hard. If you give somebody a contract and then you put a date in, then it'll be done by August 15th, and they don't sign the contract to August 7th. It's not realistic. So you want to have realistic guidelines there. And sometimes clients are really bad about getting back to you. Define a conclusion, define and dispute resolution. So you really want to have that in there if you're doing a mediator. Have your attorney review the contract. So I actually thought about sharing some of what we have. And then I'm like, after this and all this, I really think that it's best for you guys to kind of build out your own. Plenty of resources out there online that you can get the information from, but definitely depending on where you are, it wouldn't work that I gave you one that works great in Florida or in Portland or wherever your client is. You really want to make sure that the attorney has the language in there, especially because we're working with attorneys. They might come back and redline your contract. I mean, we've had it where I had a client here in Florida, he was up in Ocala, and he decided that he was not going to come to Lee County to have a lawsuit if he was going to argue with me. I was going to drive up to Ocala, and I was like, at the end of the day, it was a big contract. I'm like, okay, I'll drive 5 hours if I have to go to court and get a hotel room. I didn't expect it to ever turn into that, but you could have a contract like that where it specifically spells out that if there's a lawsuit, it's where you live. Put that in your contract. So that way that if they don't bother to read the whole thing, which ironically, sometimes they really don't, you'll have both ways. You'll have an attorney that will read every single line, and you'll have the ones that just kind of sign it. Have that in there so that you're protected. You want to have it where they're not from, where they're not known. If they're going to be suing you, you don't want them suing you in their jurisdiction. You want them having to come down here and making it a little more difficult. Not that you'll ever be sued, knock on wood, but it's still good to have that attorney review your contract. And I did put a couple of sample ones in here that you can kind of gaze over to look at just kind of like the structure of it. And then creating clarity, right? What's the difference between a proposal and an engagement letter? So a proposal is more of a quote. You're kind of saying, hey, this is, and you can do this in 17 hats. You can make it this is what we would like to do work with you, especially with a client that maybe isn't sure of what they want to purchase. You could do like a proposal where there's like add-on accounts receivable, add-on accounts payable. You can make it almost like a menu style, and then it turns into a letter of engagement or a contract. How are we for time? Okay. Follow up your proposal with a call to action. So make sure you add that call to action into your proposal, that you're asking, asking them to, reach out. And we usually say, we look forward to working with you, and an exclamation point. So that's a nice little tip in the body of the letter. Engagement letter is an agreement of services, and it should be signed by both parties. I've worked with a few people where they only have the client sign. I think in some states it's still considered a legal binding document, but truly you want to have a co-sign, because what if you send out something like with this person that we're dealing with now, and then you have a couple more meetings, you realize, oh God, I sent that contract out. I really don't want to work with them. If you don't co-sign it, you can roll it kind of back. So definitely you want to have both parties sign it. That just kind of seals the deal. 17 Hats does a great job. I don't know if the one Lillian's using does it. I'm sure it does, Dubsado. Most of them do. And then we have this. So everybody here has probably experienced scope creep. I'm curious how you all handle scope creep. Is it something that you who here is like Linda and will just do it because you want to keep the client happy, but you don't really, you sit back and you're crabby. I know Julia a lot like me. Not Sarah. I wish she was here. She'd be like,
No, yeah.
hell no, I'm not doing that. Thank God for Sarah. Sometimes you have to have that buddy system, but that clients try to go outside the boundaries. This is why if you have a really perfectly written, clearly written contract, you're setting the expectations. You can dial back to that contract and say, oh, I'd love to do that project for you. Do you want me to give you a price on doing that? And they were like, what do you mean a price? Oh, it's not in the contract. And then take a little piece out of your contract. Here's the services that you agreed to. It's not in there, but if you need me to go back to 2015 in your IOLTA because something's wrong, it's outside the contract, but we'll definitely give you a price on that. And that gives you that power of standing in your own voice here. With that, you can go back. Always, always, always. I should hit the button again. So prioritize communication. So definitely prioritize your communication with your client. Keep your deliverables very clearly defined. It's important, right? Even if it seems like it's complex, this is your foundation of your relationship with your client. So you really want this to be, solid. I think that's the best way to say it. You want it to be solid. Don't start work ever without a contract. The clearly written contract is just so important as far as expectations to stop the scope creep. It's just easier to identify it and really to manage the scope creep by using the documentation. Always discuss your deliverables. Anybody here, when you do a contract, you actually reach out to the client and do like a kickoff or go through the contract with them in person? Yeah, it's important because they might have questions and they're not really understanding. And I think that you should really do that as your part of your scope, is just sitting down and saying, here's your contract, and go through it, especially if it's complex. Some of the data migrations we do are pretty complex, so they clearly understand. And we're really good about making lucid chart designs so that they can see exactly visually what we're going to be doing. They might not understand what we're doing as we extract the data out and put it in, but we'll go right through to show them this is an example of what it's going to look like. So as we rebuild your accounts receivable for the year, it's not going to look like what came out of PC law. It's not going to be an exact representation of what you had that's already been paid. It's going to be broken out by fees and broken out by legal services or client fees, but it's not going to have the level of detail. And maybe it will, maybe that's what they're expecting. But if you're clearly defining it, you need to find out that they want all that, and then that changes the price, right? So discuss the milestones, discuss the duties, who's supposed to do this and that. Collaborate, but have a clear plan of action so you can both meet the project goal. That's key too. They know when it's necessary. You want to tell them no if it's not something that's going to be part of the scope. Let them know. Let them know that this is not included in this plan. Have a backup plan too. Projects very rarely meet their timelines, typically due to the client not providing providing documentation, but it also can be from hiccups in getting the data out. Make sure that they understand their duties, and then make sure that you work through defining the process of addressing anything that comes through. We had it the other day where this really big client had this loan with Advocate Capital, and they were loaning clients money to pay their medical bills, PI firm. And we weren't aware of that. And that ended up being that this had all these mini loans to the client that had to be tracked at that line level. There was 600 of them a month that we had to do. We figured out how to import it, but we weren't aware of that in the scope process. We had seen, because it was they were in a product that was very, what's it called, Abacus. So it had the one line, like the balance sheet was just so basic. It didn't give you any granularity in what was there. We needed to know that, we had to add that in, because if our client wins the case or matter, he's going to recoup that from the customer. So from their customer. Schedule a kickoff meeting. I highly recommend a kickoff meeting. Keep an open mind about the scope creep too. I think the kickoff meeting really helps with the projects. And actually we do on the really big projects, we actually do a meeting every week to give the client, we have one that's really big. We just meet 20 minutes, 30 minutes and just go over what's been completed and what we might need, and have that little moment with them so that they're able to ask any questions, give feedback. A couple of times they've uploaded stuff to Liscio. We didn't even know it was there. So it was good to have the meeting and, hey, you gave us a tax return, but you didn't give us the K1. So we do, actually we do meetings with Zoom, and we have the meeting with them every single week. But some clients, maybe not as big a project, like maybe it's a quarter of this big one. We'll either do a Loom video to give them the description of where they're at or what we need, or we'll actually just put in writing every week. I just give an update like, hey, this is where we're at in the project. This is what we've completed. This is what we have left to go. This is the missing data pieces that aren't there that we need to do. And I think that's important too. Prioritize your communication though. Make sure that with any project work that you're really clear about what where you are in the project and where you stand. And then I mentioned earlier, 50% of all claims filed against is due to, suits where they don't feel that they got the right job done is because it wasn't written down. So final tips, use an engagement letter. Any changes, just do a change order. Have your attorney review your contract. This is the basic contract. So you have that language in place that works best for your state. Give the client an annual engagement. So now I have another job to do. But unfortunately, I think it's a great best practice, and given especially the circumstances here, have that kickoff meeting and review the engagement letter with the client, and have a good exit paragraph with very defined terms so that if you start to have that conversation, I can't even get out of no, I can't get out. If you have to have that conversation, I can't get out of anything. Oh, maybe my mouse died. I think my mouse died. So yeah, if you have that conversation with the client, you can definitely, that's what happened. Sorry about that. You can definitely, it's not working at all. You can definitely have that moment with the client that you're able to just exit decently. Like if I had a great exit plan right now with the lady that I'm dealing with, I think that alone would probably help me to get out of it. Like just the fact that with an exit plan, you want to have with your client, you want to define clearly that, the QuickBooks file that has to get moved to your name. You got to get your name off of it, right? You need to disengage with me with lien law. I want you to know that from going forward, you need to change your passwords on your banking or remove my accountant access. So many of those little details you don't think about, but if you're disengaging, it's just really important to have that list, the exit plan list, even if you make it in like a 17 hats questionnaire or something, or however your program works. 2 minutes. Anybody have any questions? No, I know it was a lot of information, wasn't it?
I have a quick question. What if someone's not necessarily grade or doesn't want to have to write their own engagement letters or contracts, is there a service or something out there that they could request?
Yeah,
Someone to
actually,
do that?
Practice Ignition has contracts. So if you signed up for Practice Ignition, you could get those copies. I'm trying to think of there's another company too. Oh, what's her name? I'm thinking of her name. She runs it. There's another company that actually does contracts that works with mostly with the accountants that will have that language. Obviously, if
Yeah.
any of you are CPAs, and I think, who's on here that's a CPA? I think we lost her. She was here a little bit. If you're a CPA, you have different guidelines that you have to abide by and different rules, and it's a lot more stringent on the client stuff than your bookkeeping service. So if you have that, you really ought to look into that. That 50% number came from the AICPA. So that's where that piece of data came from, that, any firms that are sued, it's typically because they did not have an engagement letter in place. And then it went through, it was pretty cool. It was a podcast on the AICPA, and it went in and talked about like all the different cases and things that happened to people and why it happened. And I think that was helpful to really start to think about looking at your own contract to see if, maybe you need to take a good look at it. Maybe now's a great time to kind of go through all that. Let's see. I'm glad you thought it was helpful, Jana. Oh, somebody gave us Nicole Odin does law template. Oh, cool.
I think she's, Angela, maybe you're saying to me, Nicole, Sherry Odin does law templates for accountants. That's cool.
Oh yeah.
I was laughing because Tanya said I got a lot of work to do now thanks to this.
I'm sorry. I'm in your same place. You can be an accountability buddy. We'll check in next week to see, but I feel your pain, but I know myself, like having this happen this week has been eye-opening, and I really need to go through even my legacy clients and go back in, and some of them I need to raise their rates, and I just need to redefine the terms of what we're doing. Because especially if you have staff working for you, you might want to just sit down with your staff member and say, what exactly are you doing for the client? Because you'd be surprised. I've talked to my daughter and she's like doing like, I'm like, are you going to get his mail for him and doing on me? Like all of a sudden there's all these extra tasks that I'm not aware she's doing. I'm like, why is this job taking so long? She works for me. And she's like, oh, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. I'm like, well, when did that become part of the job? And oh, I've been doing that for a year. And now how do you take that back? And the only way you can really take that back is if you go back in and really sit back and just say, yeah, this isn't part of scope. This is your scope creep, right? I'm glad you enjoyed Joy. I mean, this is just the stuff that we want to talk about. I think we might next week, I'll have to look. We had a list. I think we're going to do like a demo of how Dext works with QuickBooks, because I think that was a request with Dext. So we'll do like a demo of Dext next week. Is that what we had on the calendar? Nicole, I forgot. We have a list.
I don't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we'll do Dex. Sarah and Nicole can do that, and then they can have a week of blah, 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 off. But yeah, no, I think the Dext is, if you're not using Dext or HubDoc, both of them work. But Dext is more powerful. When I first started working with Sarah, I was like, I'm not using Dext. I don't like orange. And then it came into seriously. And then it became like I started looking at how it works, and it's really, really powerful tool, and they're really adding to it. So I'm so glad everybody enjoyed. As always, you have the private group, so feel free to write in there too. Like there's a topic called meeting ideas or anything you want. We're here for you guys, so let us know. And we're here to accommodate and get you whatever we need. Like I mentioned, Gravity will be not next week, but the week after. And I'm really looking forward to that because we have clients on that are using Gravity, some that charge the client the fee, which is different workflow than some that the client absorbs the merchant fee. And with Gravity, you can do it, and it's done with compliance in mind. So it's really cool. And Emery's just a great guy. So he's going to be joining us, and he'll answer any questions, because you don't have to only use Gravity with Lien Law. It works with QuickBooks, or you can use it outside. It's a really helpful tool, and we really, really like it. So no more questions? Well, have a great weekend, everybody. I know you'll all be working on your contracts. Thank you, guys. Thank you. We appreciate you. Have
Thanks,
a great
Linda.
weekend.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Have a good
Bye.
weekend.